I think there are three big forces that are at work that have not existed in our lifetimes before. The coronavirus came along and is a knockback, and it has big financial implications. You are going to see central banks' balance sheets explode. They have to, because the choice is the sinking ship. I think the important thing to understand is that when the time comes where you're faced with political disruptions, is there enough money? There will be enough money. The question will be what the value of the money is and how far they can go. What are the limits to that? There are three stages really in monetary policy. And the cycle that we are in, the whole world cycle, began in 1945. That was the beginning of the New World Order. 1944, we established the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It was connected to gold. And then until 1971, that broke up. And so there was an arc in which central banks have the capacity to produce demand by producing credit. Just sort of hit a button and poof, and demand rises because credit comes out. But when interest rates no longer are effective and hit zero, as they did in 2008, you go to a monetary policy, which I call monetary policy 2, which is the printing of money and the buying of financial assets. So this first influence, monetary policy, the long-term debt cycle, monetary policy, is an overarching influence. It's important to understand where we are in that cycle. Related to that cycle is also the wealth gap cycle, periods of prosperity that occur after wars, during periods of peace. There are periods of peace because there's a dominant power that no one wants to fight, and you have a prosperous period. And during those periods, there's a lot of development of credit, a lot of also expansion of prosperity and so on, technology development, and that creates wealth gaps. So our wealth gap is now the largest since the 1930s. And the political gap is also very large. And so that influence is a giant influence. So that's number two. And then number three, as the major influence, is the rise of a great power to challenge the existing world leadership of the United States. And these cycles have happened over periods of time. That competition, that wars of various types, trade wars and the like, is another factor. So those factors are in place and were in place before we had the coronavirus. The coronavirus came along and is a knockback, and it has big financial implications. But so I think those are the three factors. And now when we look at monetary policy, I'd like to get into what that means, what the value of money is, and how that affects the markets and the currencies that we're now dealing with. Today, the economy and the markets are driven by the central banks. What I mean by that is the purchases right now of financial assets by the Federal Reserve, or the purchases by the Federal Reserve of government securities, are the drivers of that market. So the production of the money, if you look at money and you look at who is in the market. So the Federal Reserve, for example, will set an interest rate that for different types of creditors based on its economic objective. In the old days, we needed to protect banks because they were systemically important, and then money market funds and commercial paper and the like. Now it's much broader than that. The whole economy is systemically important. You are going to see central banks' balance sheets explode. They have to, because the choice is the sinking ship. I've studied the rises and decline of reserve currencies because I think we're at a key moment. And I studied the rise and decline of the Dutch guilder, the rise and decline of the British pound, the rise and decline of currencies throughout history. And the track record is a perfect track record. When the time comes where you're faced with political disruptions, is there enough money? There will be enough money. The question will be what the value of the money is and how far they can go. I think the important thing to understand is that there's a real economy, and then that has a supply demand of stuff. There's a financial economy that has its supply demand of money and credit. I think you have to understand that the capital markets drive the economy and the PEs and the risk premiums more than the real economy drives the capital markets.